Let's talk a little about organizational development. You should already know a little bit about this from your group assignments. You're diving into the world of organizational development already, thinking about how to break down a problem, propose intervention strategies, and evaluate the effectiveness of your solutions. So what exactly is organizational development? Organizational development refers to behavioral science-based theories, techniques, and systems that can help in the planning of organizational change by changing individuals' on-the-job behavior. Many consider organizational development as a longer-term effort than organizational change. So organizational change often focuses on specific, singular transformations. This could be the rollout of a new IT system or navigating the intricacies of a merger. Its emphasis is usually on short-term, immediate solutions and often pertains to specific departments or facets of the organization, rather than the entity in its entirety. In contrast, organizational development adopts a broader approach or mission. Rather than focusing on a singular shift, organizational development typically involves a mix of strategies and long-term goals relevant to the entire organization. This is a broader effort aiming at improving how people work and interact within the business environment. As an analogy, think of a company as a living, breathing organism. Organizational change can be likened to administering a specific treatment for a particular ailment. In contrast, organizational development is akin to a broader health regimen that ensures the entity remains healthy and resilient over time. Organizational development is deeply grounded in the humanistic and democratic ideals that emerged from the human relations movement. This prioritizes not just the effectiveness of an organization, but also the well-being of its employees. It emphasizes core values such as respect for people. Employees aren't just seen as workers, but as valuable individuals who bring unique perspectives to the table. Also, trust and support. There's an inherent belief in the abilities of employees, and the organization seeks to nurture and support them. Another core value is the concept of balancing power. Organizational development promotes equity. It's not about certain groups holding power and reaping rewards, but ensuring everyone has a fair say and stake. Also, facing challenges. Instead of sidestepping difficult issues, organizational development emphasizes addressing them head-on to ensure genuine resolution. And participation. Crucially, employees are engaged in decision-making processes, ensuring that changes aren't just top-down, but involve those who will be most affected by them. Through this approach, organizational development ensures that changes aren't just effective, but are also respectful, inclusive, and holistic. At its core, the classic model of organizational development is about understanding a problem, planning a solution, implementing it, and ensuring its sustainability. You should already be familiar with this 5-step framework from your tutorials. It's the one you're using to guide your group assignment. The first step is identifying the need for change. The first task is to pinpoint the issue. This means understanding what's not working. For instance, it might be that absenteeism has risen over the past year, and the organization isn't sure why. This step is where the problem needs to be clearly defined. The second step, entering and contracting. If you're an outside consultant, this is where you'd usually sit down with the stakeholders, gather preliminary insights, and reach an agreement on how to proceed. If you're internal to the organization, this might look a little bit different. It could be more about reaching a consensus on what the issue is and how big a priority it is to address. The third step, diagnosing the problem. This is about fully wrapping your head around the issue. How serious is it? If the issue is about employee satisfaction, for instance, what are they unsatisfied with? And what are some of the factors that are causing these issues? The fourth step is planning and implementing change. Here's where we focus on solutions. It could be training programs, tweaks in recruitment methods, or policy changes. It's not just about implementing one solution, but possibly a combination that fits best. And crucially, it's about ensuring that people are informed, on board, and supported through these changes. And the final step is evaluating and institutionalizing the change. It's not enough to just implement a change. We need to assess if it's working. Did the training improve skill sets? Are the new policies being adhered to? And then we strategize on making these changes a permanent part of the organizational fabric. You should be able to see how these 5 steps relate to the models of organizational change we just discussed. All these models start with the need to first recognize there's an issue, much like the unfreeze phase in Lewin's model. The The models also all agree that before any effective change can happen, there needs to be an awareness and acceptance of the existing problem. Organizational change and development are closely related activities, and organizational changes are often a big part of organizational development. But again, the organizational development process is longer term and more encompassing. It places an emphasis not just on the change itself, but also on the continuous improvement of the organization's health and culture. Organizational development professionals might use a whole range of different interventions, not just one, but often more than one as part of a project. One category of interventions focuses on interpersonal relations. This could include team building exercise designed to enhance collaboration and communication among team members. Organizational development professions might also use survey feedback to gather employee insights about how to drive change, and what's called appreciative inquiry, an approach to development that focuses on identifying and amplifying strengths within an organization. Another set of approaches target the structure and design of the work. These are often termed as techno-structural interventions. One of these is job enrichment, which we've discussed before. This empowers employees by giving them more autonomy in their roles. Re-engineering focuses on streamlining processes for efficiency. And total quality management encourages employees to consistently strive for excellence and continuous improvement in their work. At a more strategic level, organizational development might involve changing organizational structures, whether through restructuring departments or even entire companies. They might involve shaping or modifying the organizational culture, ensuring it aligns with the company's goals and values. Organizational development consultants may also work closely with top leadership in revising business strategies, ensuring the organization remains competitive and relevant in its industry. So organizational development is multifaceted. Depending on the problems identified in the organization's goals, an intervention might combine several of these tools. Let's dive a little deeper into specific organizational development techniques. One technique is the survey feedback approach. Through surveys or questionnaires, consultants can identify potential issues with employee perceptions and attitudes. They might also use feedback sessions, for example with focus groups, where results are shared and discussed. The goal here is to actively involve the employee in crafting the solution. So it's a dialogue, a give and take between the consultant and the staff. Appreciative inquiry is a modern favorite. This method is about focusing on the organization's strengths rather than its weaknesses. The process is generally divided into 4 stages. Discovery. Here, consultants engage with subject matter experts within the organization, getting them to talk about its strengths and recall past successes. Then, dreaming. This phase is about envisioning the organization's future. What would it look like for the organization to be performing at its best? The third step, design. Here, the consultant collaborates with employees, creating a shared vision for that potential future. And finally, destiny. This is where decisions on how to achieve that vision are made, often involving senior leaders. While traditional organizational development techniques tend to spotlight the problems, appreciative inquiry is all about celebrating and amplifying strengths. A critique often levied at this approach is, how can you move forward if you don't identify what's wrong? But proponents argue that understanding what's right inevitably highlights what isn't. Also, by focusing on positives, employees associate change with positive emotions, making them more receptive to it. Another classic technique that has stood the test of time is process consultation. Imagine you're a business leader and you want to figure out where the gaps are in your company. Enter the consultant, acting a bit like a detective, diving deep into a case study of your business. They'd partner with you, walk the floors, chat with everyone from the interns to the CEO, and really get a feel for how things are running. It's a bit like when a job analyst does observations to better understand a role, but this is for the whole organization. By pulling in all these observations, feedback, and even hard data, if it's available, they're essentially painting a picture for you, showing what processes are working well and where there might be room for improvement. Another technique is sensitivity training. This technique uses unstructured group interaction to change attitudes or behavior. This would involve groups coming together without a set agenda, organically discussing and engaging with one another. The goal is to boost self-awareness, understanding others better, and fostering empathy. It also sharpens listening skills and encourages openness and tolerance. Sensitivity training was really popular, especially in the 60s and 70s, but evidence suggests that it doesn't have as strong a track record of successes as some of the other organizational development techniques that are more recent. A similar but slightly different technique is what's termed intergroup development. Here, groups interact in a more structured way, with the aim of changing certain attitudes, stereotypes, or perceptions that the groups have of each other. So they might first dissect why these beliefs exist, pinpointing the cause of any tensions. Then they roll up their sleeves to devise strategies to enhance their mutual relations. Now, if you're thinking it sounds a little bit like modern diversity training, you're right. The difference is intergroup development has a broader lens, not just looking at demographics, but also roles like occupations and departments, and the rifts that can emerge between those groups as well. And there's a good evidence base for this sort of development. A 2016 meta-analysis showed that diversity training had quite positive effects on learning and behavioral outcomes in organizations. Peter Drucker is a famous management scholar, and he famously said this about organizational development. The talk you hear about adapting to change is not only stupid, it's dangerous. The only way you can manage change is to create it. By the time you catch up to change, the competition is ahead of you. What he's emphasizing here is that merely adapting isn't enough. Proactive innovation is the key. So based on that perspective, these next organizational development approaches align more with the concept of ongoing, ever-evolving change. It's about staying ahead of the curve, not just keeping pace. And one more continuous organizational development approach is establishing what some would call a learning organization. An IO psychologist would say that a distinguishing factor in whether or not your organization is a learning organization is how your organization responds to errors. A non-learning organization uses what's called single-loop learning, where the organization is effectively in autopilot mode. When an error pops up, the organization simply goes back to its tried and tested methods. It corrects the issue using past routines and current policies. It's a bit like saying, this is how we've always done it, so let's stick to it. On the other hand, a learning organization would use what's called double-loop learning. Here, errors are corrected by actually modifying the organization's objectives, policies, and standard routines. Instead of merely correcting the error using old methods, the organization asks, why did this error happen in the first place? And what do we need to do to prevent that issue from arising again? So single-loop learning is about fixing based on past experiences, while double-loop learning pushes for transformation, innovation, and growth. The last technique we'll discuss is called action research. This is a change process that's data-driven. It's a departure from traditional organizational development processes, which often have a predetermined focus. Instead of launching a project with a specific problem in mind, action research is more about embarking on a journey of discovery. It's less about sticking to a rule book and more about embracing adaptability and continuous learning. While other organizational development approaches typically have a definitive start and end, action research is iterative, cycling through stages until it achieves its objective. Action research typically starts with a diagnosis. Unlike other models where we start with a clear problem, here we kick things off by uncovering it. And we do that by systematically collecting data. We then analyze that data and use the results to show us where the problems are. There would then be a feedback process where we engage with stakeholders, from employees to management, ensuring everyone's on the same page. And then an action phase, where we implement the change based on what the data and feedback tell us. And finally, evaluation. We reflect on the action's outcomes and refine for the next cycle. But a key feature of action research is that the process doesn't end with evaluation. In fact, this evaluation is used to diagnose new issues and the cycle repeats. So while many organizational development techniques are solution-centric, action research is more problem-focused. Unlike methods like appreciative inquiry or process consultation, which start with a particular solution, action research is driven by data. It's about unearthing problems, not imposing predetermined fixes. One implication of this is that action research requires heavy involvement of employees. This means it's resource intensive, but this actually helps to minimize resistance. After all, when people are part of the discovery and solution process, they're far more likely to be on board with changes. So as we wrap up this video, let's recap what we've discussed today. We began by understanding what organizational change is and the many reasons organizations might need it. But change isn't always greeted with open arms, so we explore the sources of resistance, then discuss strategies to navigate and overcome these challenges. We then discuss two models of organizational change, Lewin's 3-step model and Kotter's more comprehensive 8-step plan. Lastly, we delved into how organizational development processes can be the catalyst for change, exploring the different approaches used to make this transformation smoother and more efficient. We'll conclude by briefly discussing what the future has in store for organizational change and development. There are lots of emerging issues that will have a profound effect on this space. The rate at which innovation is occurring is much faster than it has been in the past, especially in the technology space. Work is becoming more complex. Automation and artificial intelligence are doing more and more of our simple tasks, and human roles are becoming more intricate. People are transitioning from routine-based tasks to problem-solving, strategizing, and creative roles. Autonomy and self-management. Hierarchical structures are giving way to flatter structures where employees are expected to work more autonomously. Reduced supervision is the new norm, and self-management skills are becoming increasingly valuable. Related to this, collaboration and teamwork are now more critical than ever. There's also been an increase in teleworking and teleconferencing, especially in the wake of the COVID pandemic. We saw a huge uptake in remote work and virtual meetings. Organizations had to pivot quickly, adopting tools and strategies to maintain productivity and connectivity in a virtual environment. And finally, globalization and cultural diversity. With the world becoming more interconnected, organizations are increasingly global in their operations and outlook. This global reach brings together a melting pot of cultures. Teams today are more diverse than ever, which is a strength, but also presents challenges. Cultural competence, understanding and appreciating cultural differences and nuances, is essential for leaders and teams alike. So the landscape of organizational change and development is rapidly shifting. The future is not just about new technologies or strategies, but adapting to a new way of working and thinking. It'll require a blend of technological proficiency, cultural intelligence, and soft skills like adaptability and collaboration. That's all for this video. I'll see you all in the lecture debrief.